Hello, everybody. Lewis here, Status Coup. Today is Wednesday, July 19th, 2023. We've got a big show today, a lot to cover. For those of you just joining right now, please smash the like button. Help get this out to more folks. Say hi to everybody in the chat. Say hello, hello. Thanks for being here right on time. Today we're going to cover all sorts of stuff, including the Biden campaign struggling on small dollar donations while simultaneously basically straight up lying about their fundraising numbers, at least bending the truth, to say the least here, comparing their own fundraising hauls to Republicans while leaving out some key details that we will get into. A lot of folks in the media ran with the initial number that they put out. We looked into it a little bit and are going to give you the reality of the situation. Definitely signaling a major lack of enthusiasm potentially for the Biden campaign. Who would have thought? But beyond that, we're also going to get into Ron DeSantis did a big interview with Jake Tapper yesterday. I went through and watched that entire interview so that you don't need to. And we'll play a couple clips of what I think are some notable pieces from that interview with Jake Tapper that again went on yesterday, and also just kind of take a look at the state of the Republican primary right now. They've got their requirements for the debates out. We're going to take a look at how the different candidates are faring, where Trump stands in all of this right now, who's kind of surging and whatnot, and take a look at where things stand and why, what are DeSantis' motives here? Because it's not looking so great for him right now, as far as things are standing in the polls at this point in time. So with all of that, and at the end, we're actually going to get into a little bit of an update on a few details in East Palestine. There is a meeting going on in East Palestine this evening, where the Unity Council is actually going to be releasing new testing information. We're not going to be able to bring you all of that right now, but I am going to be able to preview it a little bit, and you've got my word that tomorrow or the next day we will put something out breaking down everything that is going on there. With that, we're going to get into this first article. Please smash the like button for those of you just getting here to help get this out to more folks. That helps the algorithm quite a bit. And we'll jump right into it with this latest from the New York Times headline: Biden with sluggish small donations waits for liberal energy to rise. Wealthy Democrats have thrown their money behind the president's re-election bid, but for many reasons, the party's small dollar donors have yet to step up their contributions. When President Biden traveled to San Francisco last month, he raised more than $10 million in 36 hours from wealthy Democrats. Trips to Chicago and New York netted millions more, as did fundraising events around Washington, proving that the party's big donor class is fully committed to Mr. Biden's re-election campaign. But the small dollar online money spigot that helped Mr. Biden smash fundraising records during his 2020 presidential campaign has not yet turned on, and there are ample signs that it may be months before it does. The Biden campaign and the Biden Victory Fund, its joint fundraising vehicle, collected $10.2 million from small dollar donors, defined as those who gave $200 or less, during the 3-month fundraising period that ended June 30th, according to Federal Election Commission report filed Saturday. That amount is half of the $21 million President Barack Obama campaign raised during the same time period of his 2012 re-election campaign, half of what Obama did in 2012. Democrats involved with Mr. Biden's campaign and the world of online fundraising detailed a host of reasons for Mr. Biden's relatively low smaller dollar haul. Google and Apple have made it harder for email senders, for example, to see data about who has opened solicitations. Inflation slowed political donations across the board. Donors are exhausted by the unending flow of emails asking for money, and recipients are responding to far fewer of them. At the moment, Democrats aren't quite as fired up as they were in 2018 and 2020 when Donald Trump opened the floodgates of liberal money, or ahead of the 2022 midterms when the Capitol riot, the rise of the election denial movement, and Supreme Court's decision overturning Roe v. Wade all motivated donors. And Mr. Biden is not an insurgent candidate who is motivating students to put up posters of him on their dorm walls, as Mr. Obama or Senator Bernie Sanders did during their campaigns. His low-key White House and bare-bones campaign haven't yet motivated supporters to rage donate to his campaign. I won't go any further here. they're missing a couple things, in my opinion. Very much dealing with a major lack of enthusiasm. We'll get into all of the reasons why I think folks are maybe not so enthused to get out and donate their hard-earned dollars for President Biden in just a second here. But I mentioned at the top here, it's in the headline as well, that Biden is straight up lying about the full fundraising totals, mincing numbers here quite a bit. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the tweet here. It shows the Biden-Harris is lapping the Republican field with $72 million in donations, and then showing where all the Republicans stand. But you can actually scroll up there, Colin, to read the full tweet here. This is a bogus chart. It says Biden campaign raised $19.8 million directly. The rest came from joint fundraising with Dem, state, and national parties. Since GOP candidates do not control the RNC, they don't do that. They get to have super PACs, but this chart, conveniently, doesn't show that money. This tweet from the president also got community noted on Twitter, which was pretty funny, saying basically the same thing here. Again, that the graph is misleading for the same reasons that the person in the tweet here laid out. Conveniently, if you do go and you look at what these Republican candidates have actually fundraised, when you look at their full fundraising from both their campaigns as well as their super PACs, the numbers get a whole lot more competitive. Biden isn't crushing the field by any means. There was a lot of folks online on YouTube, on TikTok, all sorts of people touting Biden's big fundraising numbers, all the Gen Z for Biden folks out there touting these massive fundraising hauls and whatnot. And in reality, it's not terrible, the $19.5 million or whatever. It is, again, literally half of what former President Obama got during his during his re-election campaign in 2012. But, not something to necessarily be writing home about. But again, I'm asking, why, where is this lack of enthusiasm coming from? Why are people not donating to Biden from small dollar donors? And it's really just his big campaign, his big dollar campaign donors that, go into these elite parties in New York City and San Francisco and Chicago to come bring in his fundraising haul that he does have, at least at this point. And I think it probably has something to do with a series of promises that President Biden ran on during the 2020 campaign that, never really came to fruition, or conveniently, fell out of the top of the limelight of items that he became concerned about, even though a lot of the voters who went out and voted for him, these were major issues for them. Just to name a couple, I mean, we can talk about, protecting a woman's right to choose, abortion rights. That was something that Democrats across the board talked about. We can talk about student loan forgiveness. We can talk about the $15 minimum wage. I mean, I can go on. And I'm going to go through a couple of them because, you know what? Why not? And Status Coup is on the ground to go talk to folks about a lot of these issues. So let's take a little bit of a look back at how real people, real voters on the ground feel about some of these issues, and see what they had to say. Colin, we can go ahead and play the first clip here. This is from last summer. We're going to have a couple here from when Roe versus Wade was just overturned at a protest that I attended in the state capitol here in Austin, Texas.
This is the Democrats' fault. They let this happen. We let this happen. I mean, look at the majority that Obama had in
2009.
his first. Yeah, nothing. The Republicans have been saying that they were going to do this for 50 years since Roe was passed.
Right.
They've been saying they were going to do this, and
they did it.
They did it, and they
Right.
did it, and they're not stopping there. This is just the beginning.
That young voter points out, the Republicans have been saying for 50 years they were going to do it, and they went through and actually did what they said. Imagine if Joe Biden and the Democrats went through and followed through on the things that they said they were going to do and did them. I've got another interview from that exact same day. Colin, we can go ahead and play clip number 2. This again, another young voter here in Texas puts it very eloquently, I'll say. Go ahead and play clip number 2. Today we had heard statements both from President Biden and Nancy Pelosi saying that the only way to fix this is to do it through Congress and that they don't have the votes right now. So everyone needs to go out and vote in November. What are your thoughts on our leaders just kind of essentially saying we just need to vote, and then they'll get to it? What are your thoughts on that?
Fuck Biden, fuck Nancy Pelosi. They don't give a shit about us. They have no understanding or concept of the reality that this is going to cause for many different marginalized individuals and identities. It's fucked. I mean, we've got a Democratic president, Senate, House. Where the fuck did that put us? I think the Trump presidency really had its nasty effects on us in the Supreme Court of the United States. And we're not able to vote for the Supreme Court of the United States, so what the fuck are we to do other than get out in the street?
So I would take it based on those statements. You definitely would be in support of overturning the filibuster. And, you know, at this point, obviously, I don't see it coming. Biden's not going to do anything about this, in my opinion. But if I were in his shoes, I'd be pressuring the hell out of Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and saying, hey, look, like, I will personally make sure you never win an election again. I will make sure that millions of dollars are put into campaigns to primary you. But he's definitely not doing any of that.
Well, no, he's going to have so much fucking funding from this.
Right.
Oh, people want abortions, and I'll just send a couple of emails every week to all these people and say, give me $5 and I'll get you abortion back.
Right.
You could have gotten it back. You could have codified it, you did it. And now they have funding for years to come.
Right.
If they keep this up.
And I mean, again, I she puts it better than anybody probably could here. But yeah, I mean, that was the big promise. That was the big promise going into the midterms. Okay, so, you know, this isn't necessarily Biden's talking about Biden's initial election campaign and his promises, but he and all of the Democrats were making promises like this going into the midterms. She brought up the filibuster, and, you know, back before 2022's midterms, Democrats had a slim majority in the Senate. They had a majority in the House. You had an opportunity to do something there. You could have, you know, like I talked about in there, pressure Manchin and Sinema, you know, deal with the parliamentarian, you know, President Manchin, and go ahead and actually get rid of the filibuster and protect women's right to choose and codify Roe versus Wade into law. But they didn't do that. I'm going to play one more clip from last summer. This was actually a clip just before Roe versus Wade had been overturned. Colin, you can go ahead and play clip number 3.
This is an interesting question because we're coming up in November, which is an election year, especially for like governing here, right? But I also think we're in an interesting position when you're right, Democrats do have control, and it's like, I hope that there is retaliation. I hope that there are laws that are put in place in certain states, especially the most conservative, that try to protect these women's rights. But this isn't what I want to say, but I sadly do believe that like not enough efforts will actually be made by the legislative to actually result in real laws. I think there's going to be a lot of debate. I think there's going to be filibusters, but I don't truly believe that an end result will be made simply because of it being election year of, you know, Biden doesn't like to make a lot of big moves, especially on a topic as controversial as this, so.
Again, Biden doesn't want to make the moves on controversial topics such as this, right? These sorts of things are what voters see, and in a lot of cases, young voters see. I mean, if you look at the successes of smaller dollar fundraising with the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016 and in 2020, it was motivating young people. It was motivating everyday working class folks to set aside $5 at a time and send it in and send a couple dollars here, a couple dollars there. And if those people are donating, you know that those people are going to get out and vote for you. The billionaires only have one vote, just like you and I have one vote. If you can get a couple billionaires to give you some money, sure, that's something. It can help influence people. But when you convince people to actually get out and and give some money, then they are very likely going to go out and do it. I see a question, where were those interviews? Those interviews were done last summer in Austin, Texas, near the state capitol during a series of protests that happened there. Those are from last summer, getting out there and actually, listening to voters and seeing what they have to say, giving the microphone to the people to let them get their message out. But again, going back to that time frame last summer, going into the midterm elections, we talked to a lot of voters on the ground in Pennsylvania as well. And the promise was from Democrats, come out, donate money to us. We'll make sure, come out and vote for us. We will make sure that we protect abortion rights across the United States. We will make sure that you don't need to worry about that anymore, that these progressive ideas are going to be protected. And I mean, abortion rights aren't a progressive idea. That should be a pretty basic idea at that point that the public overwhelmingly supports, will I add, whether you're in a conservative state or a more liberal state. But that was the promise. Democrats came out in overwhelming numbers, voted beat all expectations of the polls. Democrats fared better in the House than they were going to, even though they still lost it by a slim majority, and they miraculously kept the Senate. And, of course they're doing nothing about it. So when, voters see Biden flop on Roe versus Wade, that's why they probably have a lack of enthusiasm. Let's move on past abortion rights, though, in Roe versus Wade. Let's talk about student loan forgiveness. Another huge campaign promise of the Biden administration. He, initially said, we're going to forgive $10,000 in student loans. People asked if he would go higher. He said he wouldn't. To his credit, eventually he was like, okay, you know what? When they put out the actual policy, they had $20,000 in forgiveness for folks who had a Pell Grant. That's big for a lot of people who had a Pell Grant. Personally, it would have helped me a lot. Full disclosure, I mean, I had Pell Grants, and that would have essentially made it so that I only had a couple $1,000s in student loans left. It would have been a much more manageable solution. Biden talked about that during the campaign, went through and said he would do it. There were other ways to go ahead and do this. He went through and he put through the student loan forgiveness in the way that he did. What happened? It gets challenged in the court. A lot of people were saying that it was probably going to get challenged in the court doing it the way that he did. Now they're saying, we're going to try to fight to get this through another way, doing the rulemaking, this and that. And now we're going to create this other sort of, different sort of repayment plan. And there's a 1-year on-ramp. Oh, by the way, we're going to stop the pause on student loan forgiveness. So yeah, you are going to have to start paying again. And it's like, okay, so we went from, we're going to cancel, $10,000 in student debt or $20,000 in student debt if you have a Pell Grant, to it getting overturned. And now it's like, oh, by the way, the pause is done. And in addition to that, we're going to kind of try to do something down the line, but we don't really know if it's going to get anywhere. It's not a good look. If you're trying to get enthusiasm and small dollar donations, this is not the strategy that I would be taking at all. The third one, $15 minimum wage, we'll get into in a second here with another bit of on-the-ground reporting from Status Coup. But I got to say, we got about 100 people watching right now. Please smash the like button. Let's get this out to more folks. It helps in the algorithm more than you know. So please go ahead and do that. And if it's your first time watching us, hit the subscribe button down below. That's a nice, easy way to get notified when we are live or when we're putting out more content, on-the-ground content in a lot of cases as well. Getting into the last major example here, the $15 minimum wage. There's the famous, very awkward Bernie endorsement video where Bernie and Biden did this very awkward, very scripted feeling Zoom call where Biden officially gets Bernie's endorsement. One of the major asks from Bernie Sanders was, where are you on the $15 minimum wage? Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Do you have any questions for me, Bernie, at all?
I did, Joe. Let's talk about some of the areas that I think we are actually fairly close. There are some areas where we disagree, but some where we are fairly close. Let's talk about the economy. And above and beyond the crisis that we're in right now, very well that millions of our people are working for starvation wages. And one of the fights that I've been waging for a number of years now is to raise that minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. Is that something, Joe, that you are supportive of?
Bernie, I am extremely supportive of that. And I thank you for leading on it. I thank you for your endorsement, your support. But it means a great deal to me personally.
It means a great deal to President Biden personally. It means so much to him personally. It means so much to him that when was the last time you heard him talk about it? Think about it. When was the last time you heard Joe Biden talk about a $15 minimum wage? Because I don't remember. They haven't lumped it into anything. They haven't tried to sneak it into any sort of deal. And people notice that. Let's take a listen to a voter that I spoke with outside of a Bernie Sanders rally in the state of Pennsylvania. He was out rallying to get folks to go vote for now Senator John Fetterman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Do you have any questions for me?
I'll definitely make the $15 minimum wage, a pillar of. I'll definitely get it done. When was the last time you heard anyone talk about minimum wage? Never, right?
The last time Biden and the Democratic Party leadership talked about $15 minimum wage was before 2021. That's after the Manchin and Sinema stuff happened, but it's also right after the Glenn Youngkin victory in Virginia. I think a lot of people, after the Glenn Youngkin victory in Virginia, pretty much everybody just gave up on Biden. They said it's over. Might as well not even try anymore because it's going to be a 2010 red wave, which I feel was a misstep because Glenn Youngkin only won by 0.5%. The idea that...
Right, not a landslide, yeah.
The idea that it was just over now and that the voters have spoken and that far-left Joe Biden is going to get a push. When really, what can you say Biden did far-left except try to get Build Back Better? There was an attempt. It wasn't like some stump speech, but he tried.
So again, regular people who are your potential small dollar donors are noticing this stuff because of course they would. These are issues that affect their day-to-day bottom line. Not having a $15 minimum wage affects your day-to-day bottom line. Potentially not having abortion access, depending on where you live in the country, that affects your day-to-day life, or at least the circumstances that you might be in. It might. The student loan crisis. I mean, that one personally affects my day-to-day life of how much in debt I am at the end of the day right now. Or for thousands and thousands and frankly millions of other Americans who are in way more debt than I am. I'm frankly fairly lucky to be in the situation that I'm in here. Enthusiasm and fundraising are tied together. If you can't get people enthusiastic about your vision for the future or what you're going to do, then it makes a whole lot of sense as to why your fundraising numbers look the way that they are, especially as far as small dollar donors go. And you know what? At this point, they're deserving these numbers, and you can get into other specifics here too. I mean, you can look at the infrastructure bill. Am I glad that we had an infrastructure bill? Of course. But just like with so many other things, Democrats negotiated themselves down on so many of these things. I've said this a couple times, but President Trump he was trying to do a $4 trillion infrastructure plan. Now, he didn't get it done, just like a lot of other things that he wasn't able to get done, but the Biden administration's biggest infrastructure plan that they actually tried to get through was something like $2 trillion. Why are you coming in at half of what the Republicans are coming in at on infrastructure spending? That should be super popular. And instead, they essentially kind of we want to be cautious of this or cautious of that. We don't want to get too crazy on spending the money or, this or that or the other thing. And what does it get you? It gets you this. Low fundraising numbers. And you know what? Biden he potentially has some reasons to worry. There's even some big money who is potentially a little bit nervous about where Biden is on this. This is from last week, but I want to pull this up, Colin. The CNN article, slow pace of Biden's reelection campaign feeds Democrats' 2024 anxiety. The conversations keep happening. Quiet whispers on the sidelines of events, texts, emails, furtive phone calls, as top Democrats and donors reach out to those seen as possible replacement presidential candidates. get ready, they urge in conversations that aides to several of the people involved here have described to CNN, despite what he has said, despite the campaign that has already been announced, President Joe Biden won't actually be running for re-election. They feel like the time is already running out, and that the lack of the more robust campaign activity they want to see is a sign that his heart really isn't in it. It's a persistent sense that the inner circle of advisors to the president and several of the very aides who have been hired for his re-election campaign dismiss as absurd. Of course, he is running, they say. Of course, they're taking preparations very seriously, and with the always present Biden chip on their shoulder, of course, they're being written off again by the purported wise elders of the party and pundits who still refuse to take him seriously. I won't get into the whole thing here, but I mean, that's not a good sign for President Biden to have CNN writing articles that big dollar donors are talking to CNN saying that they're wary, or you know, aides involved with these big dollar donors. That is not a good sign. Now, I'm not saying that Biden is, in my view, Biden is absolutely going to be the Democratic nominee, but these are not headlines that you want as Biden. Maybe some of this could come to light, and Biden does have some things to worry about. I mean, you know, I like certain things about Marianne Williamson. A lot of, you know, there's enthusiasm around RFK and whatnot. I don't want to dismiss either of their campaigns, but in a world where the DNC is saying no debates, you know, those two candidates don't have a big shot. I don't think either of their fundraising numbers are anything to write home about, especially when you are, again, running against an incumbent president. I noticed we got a super chat there. I'll read them all at the end. So thank you for that super chat, Nikki. I will read the details at the end. And if anyone wants to leave a super chat, Nikki, you can do just like she did right there. Thank you, Nikki. But you know, I think Biden is going to have no problem in the Democratic primary. Where he might run into issues, though, is we already have one third-party candidate announced with Cornel West. You know, Jordan's been covering Cornel West quite a bit lately because a lot of people are treating him pretty unfair to get this thing started. But on top of Cornel West, you know, you've got other rumblings of other potential third-party candidates getting involved here. Joe Manchin and others were talking in New Hampshire yesterday about the No Labels Party ticket. That No Labels Party ticket is probably going to try to put up some more quote-unquote moderate candidates who could steal from the more moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats. You also, you know, like I mentioned, you have Cornel West, who is going to potentially pull more, you know, folks on the left, progressives. And if you have the more progressive wing interested in Cornel West, you have potentially some of your moderates interested in a potential No Labels Party run. Again, we know very little about this at this point. That starts to spell trouble for a Joe Biden who clearly, as I just went through, is suffering with small dollar donors and clearly has a major enthusiasm problem. I don't know people, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe this is anecdotal, but who's excited about Joe Biden? I don't know people who are excited about Joe Biden. I do see, you know, some of those young Gen Z for Biden people on TikTok and whatnot who are, like, in a lot of cases getting money from DNC places or whatever, making these like Biden hype videos. But if you look into the comments and stuff on them, it doesn't feel like there are real people who feel very similarly to them. I don't know. We'll see. It is yet to be seen at this point. We're going to transition into our next topic here in a second. But first, I just want to say, I mean, we were able to take a look back at some of my on-the-ground reporting here. Jordan's also done extensive on-the-ground reporting, a lot more than I have over the last several years. And the only reason we're able to actually, you know, instead of just sitting here, you know, in front of my computer, Jordan sitting in the studio somewhere, instead of just doing this, we actually go on the ground and talk to real voters. We talk to people who are going through some real shit, frankly, to understand the real lived experience of Americans across the country. And that is a major thing that most of the mainstream media, frankly, a lot of other YouTubers who get a little comfortable in their studios, they don't get that same perspective of what the real lived experience in the United States of America is like in 2023. Whether it be the folks in East Palestine, Ohio, the folks in Flint, Michigan, Kalamazoo, Flint, Jackson, Mississippi, wherever else, Status Coup tries to be there. If you want to help make sure that we're able to continue doing that, the link is right there, statuscoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. It makes a big difference. It might not seem like a lot of money. If it's too much money, don't do it. By all means, you can help us out in other ways by liking the video, by subscribing on here. But statuscoup.com/join is the best way to ensure that we're able to continue to do the on-the-ground coverage. We've also had John Farina on the ground quite a bit lately, covering some of the UPS practice pickets. You bet that if UPS does, in fact, go on their strike at the end of this month, that we will be on the ground in more than one place, probably, covering this where it is happening on the ground. So statuscoup.com/join is the place to be able to do that. So, without further ado here, as I highlighted in the very beginning of the story, we are dealing with yesterday. Ron DeSantis had an interview with CNN, Jake Tapper. They sat down for about 25 minutes or so, and I watched through it. Some of it was less exciting than other parts, so there's a couple things that stood out to me that I kind of wanted to highlight here today. And we'll also, after that, get into a little bit of the state of kind of the GOP primary right now for president. Obviously, we've got President Trump way ahead of everybody else in the polls at this point in time, but there's still a lot of time, and also Trump, to put it lightly, has a lot he's currently dealing with at the moment. So let's start off first, though. Ron DeSantis discussing wokeness in the military.
So I hear you. Recruitment, without question, is a problem. The Army did this survey. I'll give you a copy of it if you want. They haven't released it, but I got my hands on a copy. And it surveyed people, I think 16 to 28 barriers to service, and beyond the ones such as don't want to die, don't want to be injured, don't want to be away from my family. The biggest issues were the number 2 issue: women and racial or ethnic minorities are discriminated against in the Army. Wokeness is listed here, but it's only number 9. So that would suggest that wokeness is not as big.
Well, but I think there's an issue about, like, not everyone really knows what wokeness is. I mean, I've defined it, but a lot of people who rail against wokeness can't even define it. And so I think it's a sense of, this is not something that's holding true to the core martial values that make the military unique. And I can tell you, the veterans, you don't have to look far and wide. Go to a VFW hall, go to an American Legion. There's huge amount of concern about the direction that the military is going with all this.
I think that if he actually went and talked to folks in the military, that wokeness probably isn't their top concern. I mean, Jake Tapper had the survey there to show that as well, but something tells me that if you're in the military, wokeness is probably not near the top of the list. I mean, it's an issue that DeSantis, I feel like, is kind of misreading in this race, is that a lot of Republicans, that it's even amongst like kind of mainstream Republicans, is not their major issue. I use a lot of my family and friends who actually live in New Hampshire, an important state, that's where I lived for many years, as a kind of a barometer on this, and even they tell me, and some of them are fans of DeSantis. I'll say they right now they say that they would vote for DeSantis over Trump, but they're saying he's getting too much into some of this woke stuff, that it's not the top thing for them, and that he needs to be focusing more on real issues that affect people day to day. Economics is obviously, let's talk about getting, making sure that people, dealing with inflation, making sure that people can afford basic needs and whatnot. A lot of those types of issues are more important than dealing with wokeness. Not ideal. DeSantis also continued to talk a little bit about abortion in this interview with Jake Tapper. Colin, we can go ahead and play the next clip.
Let's talk about some issues here in the United States. You've been asked by a number of members of conservative media, and you have yet to give a yes or no answer. You recently signed a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. Yes or no, would you support that as a nationwide ban?
So I said I'm pro-life. I will be a pro-life president, and we will support pro-life policies. At the same time, I look at what's going on in the Congress, and I don't see them making very much headway. I think the danger from Congress is if we lose the election, they're going to try to nationalize abortion up until the moment of birth. And in some liberal states, you actually have post-birth abortions. And I think that that's wrong. Also, with respect to the military thing that we talked about, we're going to reverse the abortion tourism policy in the Department of Defense. They're actually paying people to go and get abortions with American tax dollars as part of the military. They won't even pay you. You lose a loved one. You don't get that type of time off to be able to go to do funerals. And so we're going to continue to stand for life, and we're going to make sure that everybody knows that.
So in that interview, again, he goes from wokeness, which, again, I don't think it's actually a top-tier issue for Republicans, and then moves on to what I would describe are some crazy talk about abortion, and which, again, I'll say, even in conservative states, people believe that a 6-week abortion ban is extreme. We can look back. I know Kansas, when they put it up to their voters, Kansas voted to protect abortion rights. Other conservative states have done the same thing. When you look at polling on this sort of thing, it doesn't make any real sense. The talk about post-birth abortions, to my knowledge, that doesn't actually exist. Someone can prove me wrong if that's not true, but post-birth abortions, that's not a real issue that Americans are dealing with or experiencing. If it is, then that's a whole other conversation, because that's not an abortion. That's somebody's already born at that point. So, most people are not in the same category as Ron DeSantis, and Ron DeSantis keeps focusing on some of these issues that are not top of mind for voters. Again, people want their kitchen table issues solved. They want their economic message. What is the economic message? Not end wokeness in the military and 6-week abortion bans. And you know what? On the abortion answer, he also mentioned abortion tourism for members of the military. And John Kirby was asked about this. I believe it was at the White House, and the actual importance of abortion for the military. Colin, we can go ahead and play that clip.
Why is the new DoD policy on abortion critical to military readiness?
I'm really glad you asked that question. No, I mean, I really am. 1 in 5 members of the U.S. military are women, 20%. We're an all-volunteer force. Nobody's forcing you to sign up and go. People volunteer to go. You raise your right hand and you say, I'm gonna do this for a few years or even for my life. And it might cost me my life to do it. And when you sign up and you make that contract, you have every right to expect that the organization, in this case the military, is going to take care of you, and they're going to take care of your families, and they're going to make sure that you can serve with dignity and respect, no matter who you are, or who you love, or how you worship or don't. And our policies, whether they're diversity, inclusion, and equity, or whether they're about transgender individuals who qualify physically and mentally to serve, to be able to do it with dignity, or whether it's about female service members, 1 in 5, or female family members being able to count on the kinds of health care and reproductive care specifically that they need to serve. That is a foundational, sacred obligation of military leaders across the river. I've seen it myself, and it matters because it says we're invested in you because you are being willing to invest in us. You're investing your life, your family's livelihood with us. We owe you that back in return.
And I'll say that sort of setup is unfortunate. I mean, it's unfortunate that what I'm about to say needs to be a thing, but that's not that uncommon. Even when you look at states with strict abortion laws, just like Texas, Florida, other states with strict abortion laws, many times even private companies will, if one of their employees needs an abortion, will legitimately cover the costs of an employee traveling out of state to a state where that they can have that healthcare procedure done for them. there are companies that will do the same thing. The military seemingly, does similar things for folks if they're on a base in in Texas. Maybe they're abroad somewhere where it can't be done, to make sure that women can get access to healthcare in this sort of situation. Again, shouldn't have to be going to this sort of thing, but that's where we are. There's one other part to this that I'll bring up as well. First, smash the like button. We got over 130 people watching. We could probably get a little bit higher than that, so please continue to press the like button. And again, if this is your first time seeing us, hit the subscribe button down below. That's an easy way to help us out. And also, super chats are very much welcome. We've got a couple already. I will read all of the super chats at the end of the show, even if it's just $1, $2, $5, whatever you can do. We would very much appreciate it. The last bit of this interview that I wanted to point out, DeSantis saying that he would ban all trans people from being able to be in the military. Colin, we can go ahead and play that clip.
Your new policy that you announced today about the military would ban transgender Americans from serving in the military, regardless of their ability. And this comes on the heels of your campaign retweeting a video that the Log Cabin Republicans, which is a conservative LGBTQ group, said, quote, ventured into homophobic territory, unquote. There are more than 1 million trans adults in the U.S. What are their lives and the lives of the people who love and support them going to be like under a DeSantis administration?
Well, look, in the military, it's all about the mission first. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why you focus on mission first. People's individuality, it does take, you do have to check that at the door. And that's not the only example. There's a whole host of other examples. So I think the military culture is unique in terms of that.
Again, he's saying what is mission critical, essentially. That's what needs to be focused on, is what is mission critical. So if we're going to be objective and say what is mission critical, wouldn't a trans person or a man or a woman or a trans man or a trans woman, regardless of who it is, if they can do the job, if they can meet the qualifications to do the job, if we're, just focused on the mission, doesn't it seem kind of weird, if you're worried about recruitment, as Ron DeSantis is with the military, to ban roughly 1 million Americans from being able to join the military? If it's mission ready, if mission focused, if we're so mission focused, why would we leave out people who could meet the physical requirements to be in the military? Or, not all parts of the military are even physical or combat. There's a lot of other parts of the military that you might be sitting in an office. Feels like it's not really mission critical, as Ron DeSantis is saying here. Doesn't surprise me that he's saying that, especially considering his track record for LGBTQ legislation in the state of Florida, that I will mention Jordan and Status Coup covered extensively almost 2 years ago at this point, far ahead of the curve as far as what the rest of the media were in covering DeSantis's reign over Florida, if you will. Doesn't seem to me like it is actually that mission focused when we are looking at that sort of thing here. A couple other points that I want to get to here. I mean, I'm going to start to shift gears a little bit away from just DeSantis and talk about the kind of Republican primary process as a whole right now, because essentially we're looking at upcoming debates. The first one, I believe, is in August, end of August at this point. There are roughly 6 candidates who are going to qualify. We'll get into exactly who those are in a second. But very notably, President Trump is probably not going to go debate. He's said as much a couple times, they didn't reach out to me about, picking the date initially, and what do I have to gain by going to go and do a debate with these folks? They're all polling at 1%, yada, 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 Trump being Trump. And that puts DeSantis as the front runner, essentially, on the debate stage. DeSantis and a lot of the other candidates all have had a hard time trying to criticize Trump on anything. So, in my view, that debate stage is going to look something like 4, maybe 5 individuals plus Ron DeSantis, and those 4 to 5 people very likely just bullying against Ron DeSantis, because, frankly, those 4 to 5 definitely don't have a chance for winning the nominee, in my opinion. DeSantis has a very slim chance. I'll explain what that slim chance is in a second. But those other 4 to 5 are essentially running for vice president, right? They're running for vice president. So if they go on that debate stage and they attack Ron DeSantis effectively on the debate stage, sure, they might get a little bump in the poll, whatever it may be, might bring DeSantis down a little bit. But when you've got Trump in the average of polls sitting above 50%, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a two-way race even, right? It doesn't matter if it's a two-way race. You've got these folks attacking DeSantis going down, and these folks, selling themselves to be a great VP pick for Trump. It spells disaster for DeSantis, in my opinion. We'll see. As far as, the potential path for DeSantis to actually win this thing, at least win the nomination for the Republican side. I talked with Jordan a little bit on this today. I don't fully agree with him on all of it. The question is, though, is he waiting for Trump to either, one of these indictments to kind of come to fruition and like a chance at jail time, either actually going to jail, I don't see that ever happening, or, his lawyers telling him, and this is kind of Jordan's theory, is his lawyers telling him, hey, it's not looking good for you. You're probably going to end up with jail time if you don't do something now. Why don't we try to strike some sort of a deal, find a gracious way to drop out of the race, and say, the deep state won, they got us, they cheated us, yada, yada, yada. And that leaves a candidate, Ron DeSantis, who is, kind of a clear number 2 right now, but it leaves him in a better position. Now, personally, I don't know why, but I think that Trump is going to find a way to delay these indictments and whatnot, make it happen, after the election. His plan is maybe he wins the election, he pardons himself, something like that. I think Trump has gotten himself out of so many situations like that. This is purely just a hunch at this point, to be clear. I don't see DeSantis kind of stepping in and swooping in like that, but you never know. It could happen. Anything could happen. Colin, I saw one comment from Tony here asking, can Lucy my member milestone chat? I don't know that, I don't know if those are something that I'm supposed to see or not, but you can send me a message on it. I want to get into, though, one thing here on the Republican debates and who is actually going to be qualifying. So we can, Colin, pull up that article from Politico if you can. Trump, 5 rivals on the cusp of qualifying for the first GOP debate. The Republican National Committee clarified on Tuesday that its criteria for political or presidential candidates to qualify for the debate stage is ever so slightly higher than Politico and other news outlets had interpreted. The committee confirmed that candidates have 2 paths for hitting the polling criteria in order to qualify for the first primary debate next month. They could hit 1% in 3 RNC-sanctioned national polls, or they could hit that mark in 2 national polls combined with 2, not 1, state-specific poll. Earlier in the day, Politico incorrectly reported that half a dozen candidates had qualified for the debate, which is set to be held on August 23rd in Milwaukee. Due to a misinterpretation of the committee's criteria, no candidate has met the mark just yet. The confusion stemmed from the wording within the RNC's debate qualifications. Criteria read to score an invite to the debate stage. Candidates needed either 1% in 3 national polls or 2 national polls and 1% in an early state poll. We can, sorry, that gets a little wordier than I was intending, but to parse it down a little bit, essentially they need 2 national polls and 2 early state polls to qualify. 5 of the candidates are, basically there. They're all waiting on another poll to come out, as I'm sure a lot of you are familiar. There are only a certain number of sanctioned polls. They only come out every so often. So at this point, it is pretty clear that Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie, and Tim Scott will hit that threshold. There's also a donor requirement where you need to have 40,000 individual donors to qualify. The thing is, though, like I said, Donald Trump attending that debate, probably not going to necessarily happen. Ron DeSantis has said he would do the debate. I'm sure Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie, and Tim Scott all want to be on the stage because, frankly, a lot of them are folks who are polling at around 1%. With the exception of Vivek Ramaswamy, we'll look at his polling in a second, but he's actually ahead of Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence in some of these polls. And I will say, too, that in addition to those candidates, Mike Pence is on the cusp of being able to do it. He actually hasn't hit the 40,000 individual donor mark yet, which, as a former vice president of the United States, if you're running and you don't have 40,000 individual donors yet, and it's been a couple weeks since you've started it, that's a little bit embarrassing in my book as far as how that goes. Yeah, and I mean, it's if we take a look in addition to this at just like the polls in general on the Republican side, and you can kind of get a look at some clear trends here. Colin, you can pull up the Real Clear Politics averages here, and if you can scroll to the chart that kind of shows everything. Yeah, so obviously those two lines right there at the top, purple is Trump, green is DeSantis. And, if you look at the average of the polls right now, today, Trump is literally sitting at 53%. So that obviously means even in a two-way race, there's no chance for anybody, whether it be DeSantis or anybody. DeSantis sitting at 20.9% right now. Notably, DeSantis announced his campaign in May. He had a very tiny bump in May, around May 24th, and then it's just been trending down since. In general, he's just been trending down since the middle of February or so. That's not the direction you want to be going. Obviously, if you want to convince people that you're going to be able to pull this off, I will note it's going to be hard to see on here, so you're going to have to kind of take my word for it a little bit. Vivek Ramaswamy is somebody who's been making a bit of making some waves in GOP circles, if you will. He's gotten himself up to double digits on a couple polls, kind of within a couple points on specific polls with Governor Ron DeSantis. He's beating former Vice President Mike Pence in a couple of polls. The guy is super well funded. He's a really wealthy biotech CEO. He's gonna eat away potentially at some of DeSantis' stuff. He's very focused on anti-woke stuff. He's got a book literally called something like Woke Inc. or something along those lines. But anyway, that whole cast and crew of people on a debate stage with Ron DeSantis, like I said, is going to be sitting there attacking Ron DeSantis. Trump's very likely not going to be on the stage. It if anything, helps Trump. Trump can watch the whole thing. He'll probably put on some sort of counter event at the same exact time, just guessing based on what he said. I think he said something a little bit along these lines, but it sounds very on brand for him. And we'll ultimately see what happens. I mean, yeah, it's getting close to that time frame. I wish we had some Democrat debates to be able to get ready to watch as well. Of course, that's not the case at this point in time. Not even at this point in time. It's not going to happen. Let's be real here. But that's kind of where things are standing right now on the GOP side of the debate. One last little topic that I want to get into. We won't spend too much time on this, and for those of you watching still, doesn't hurt to press the like button if you haven't done it yet. Yeah, that would help us out quite a bit. Last topic that we're gonna get into tonight in East Palestine. The Unity Council is actually putting on an event. That event is starting now-ish. I'm blanking on the specific time, maybe a little bit later, but it is going on this evening, and they are announcing some new test results from some independent testers in the area. We don't have all of the information yet, but my hunch is that there's going to be some interesting findings here. They've put out a press release. They announced this event well in advance. Obviously, as I reported a little over a week ago, the EPA kind of doubling down, saying that they fully stand behind their residential air testing, even after, it's been kind of months of several experts speaking out saying exactly the opposite. These are experts from, obviously, we've talked about Andrew Welton from Purdue University, writing an open letter to the entire Ohio delegation, the federal delegation, including, the senators, the representative for the area, He's complained to Governor Mike DeWine before. He's reached out to the director of the EPA saying that these tests that were being done by the EPA, especially indoor air tests, were faulty at best. In addition to that, we had researchers from Texas A&M University, from Carnegie Mellon University, who were doing their own testing as well with much higher sensitivity instruments that the EPA was clearly not using, finding chemicals that the EPA was not finding, which again leads residents and folks like me to ask the EPA, how did you miss these things? And instead of saying, hey, we're going back and we're like double checking and looking into this stuff, the EPA's reply to me last week was, well, we disagree with everybody else who's saying all of those things, and we stand behind our indoor air testing. Obviously not a great answer. Residents in East Palestine not happy. But again, Unity Council tonight will be announcing additional independent testing results that we'll be keen to bring to you probably tomorrow, if not on Friday at some point. So if you're not subscribed already, hit the subscribe button and you'll be able to see that video to see exactly what happened as far as the results being announced tonight. And not to be just like a Debbie Downer, but derailments are still happening left and right across the United States. Again, in 2022, 1,300 train derailments in 2022. 1,300. Yes, that's more than 3 a day in 2022. And do you know what the federal government has done to try to fix any of it? Still nothing. Still nothing. Last week I brought to you an article, the Railway Safety Act currently kind of stalled out, fizzling out at this point. A couple Republican lawmakers saying too much regulation. They don't want to do anything with it. Not great. And we'll see if anything changes there. But I've been saying for months, the further away we get from the East Palestine derailment, the less likely this is going to happen. Most derailments are not national news. Most of them are things that kind of happen, nobody pays attention to. Lately, people pay attention a little bit more, but there was a derailment just a couple days ago in Philadelphia. Colin, we can go ahead and play the clip that just has the drone footage from that derailment there. As you can see, it was, I believe it was roughly 15 cars that derailed. Several houses were actually evacuated pretty quickly for this, which is good. Maybe there's a little bit more urgency to do it when people hear there's a train derailment in their backyard. They're probably rightfully a little bit worried now. As you can see, there were tanker cars involved. Fortunately, several of them were empty. At least one of them had a chemical that was concerning. There were no leaks with the chemicals. The only car that had any kind of leaking anything was one that had silicone pellets. Didn't cause any threat to, the air or the water or anything in the immediate area. So fortunately, folks, in that area near Philadelphia, not needing to worry. But it's certainly upsetting when you see, stuff like this happening fairly regularly now that when you're looking more into it, and you see the worst of what can happen when you look at all of the coverage we've done in East Palestine. Again, I've been on the ground in East Palestine 3 times. We're looking to get back to East Palestine in the month of August. We're currently chatting about dates and whatnot right now. So definitely, if you're not a member and you want to help us get back to East Palestine to continue to highlight the stories from these residents, to continue to dig into some of the investigative stories that we've dug into at this point, statuscoup.com/join, again, is going to be the best way to do it. That's something big we're working on for August. Again, if the UPS strikes begin to happen, you bet we'll be on the ground across the country where the big UPS strikes are going on. With that, we are going to start to wrap this up here. We've got a couple super chats that I'm going to get into. And I'm going to start off here. Awesome. Colin did get me Tony D's member chat here. It says Tony D, member for 1 year and member for 16 months. Status cool. Joe Biden doesn't deserve small dollars. And then Hart Lewis. Thank you so much, Tony. Appreciate it. And thanks for being a member for a year or 16 months. I'm not sure which one it is, but thank you either way. Congrats on hitting the 1 year or the 16-month milestone. Thanks for always being in the chat as well. I can't put that one up on the screen just because it came in a different spot. But Tony, we definitely appreciate the support that you give us very often. So thank you very much. Another super chat from Nikki O'Brien, $4.99. Thank you for all you do, Lewis. Long live Status Coup and Status Lou. Thank you, Nikki, for the $4.99. Very much appreciated. We've got a super sticker from Fly Chomper Fly, 99 cents. Thank you so much, Fly Chomper Fly. I don't know the details behind this, but I'm wondering if the parrot, I believe it's a parrot or a parakeet, is Chomper. I see it in the little image there. Fly Chomper Fly, 99 cents. Thank you very much. We also have another $2 from Fly Chomper Fly. What an oxymoron. Repubs are pro-life equals pro-military. That's it is pretty ridiculous. Those two things do not equate. Thanks for that additional super chat, Fly Chomper Fly. Another one, Jeff Anderson, $10. This was going to be my drug money for next week. All right, Jeff, we appreciate you sending it our way instead. Thanks so much for that super chat coming in here at the last minute. Appreciate that. And another one, last minute here from Chris Garrett, $5. Get back to East Palestine, Lewis. Chris, we'll be getting back there. Again, still working on dates right now, but it's going to happen in the month of August for sure. A lot of catching up to do with folks there. Know that, Jordan and I are still talking with these folks, many of them on a weekly basis, lots of different people, still following very closely everything that's going on. And we're definitely going to have some updates after tonight's meeting there that the Unity Council called, again, to highlight the new independent testing that has just come out there. Really appreciate everybody who came and joined us tonight. Some frustrating stuff. I mean, the Biden story in the beginning too, really, it's not shocking, the lack of small dollar donors involved in his campaign at this point. Frankly, I don't even like some of the, I'm all for third party type things. The no labels thing is kind of blah for me. But I really do hope that they put a candidate out there. I think it'll pull from Republicans and Democrats, and I hope Cornel West does well and gets a bunch of people excited, because the current situation of things is just so freaking gross. The system that we're playing in right now isn't benefiting anybody, and seeing anybody come in and shake the system up from outside of the two-party system, for me, would be a massive win for the country. I really hope that we see, from any end of the spectrum, I would like to see more independent candidates who can try to make a dent in, knocking the duopoly down a bit, if you will. So we'll see. I don't know. Thank you all very much for watching. I won't take any more of your time. Stay tuned. We've got a bunch more for you. Tomorrow night we'll be live as well. A lot more content coming. Again, looking to get back on the ground in a couple new places. So with that, everybody have a nice night. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.